and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. Today I am talking about The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger, released in 2003, and I'm comparing it with the movie directed by Robert Schwentke, released in 2009. And this was requested by Sapphire Witch, so Sapphire Witch, I hope you enjoy this video, and be sure and share your comments on both book and movie down below. And I don't know if Sapphire Witch likes this book or not, but to them and anyone else who does, I do want to warn you that I have a lot of issues with this book, so much so that I am going to have a whole book rant section of this video. So if you love this book, you can just skip over my book rant part and just get into my book versus movie comparison. And even in the comparison, when talking about the plots, I will be touching on some of these issues I have, but I wanted to keep my negativity to a minimum, at least to some extent, so a lot of my issues will be in this book rant section. And to get into some of my complaints with the book, I will have to spoil the book and the ending. And so if you don't want the ending spoiled, then this isn't a video you can watch, because I'll be getting into spoilers right off the bat. But for those who have not read the book or have not seen the movie, I want you to have some context for my complaints with this. So to get into the setup of this book, the story is about Henry and Claire, and Henry is a time traveler, but he cannot choose when or where he travels to, and it's almost like a seizure where he just can't control it. Like something will set it off, and then suddenly he's in a different time and place, and he doesn't know how long he'll be there because he will just randomly disappear and reappear in various times and places. And he does tend to return to significant places and times from either the past or significant things in the future. For example, his mom dies when he is 6, and he frequently returns to that event. But he also just travels to random places that he has no connection to as well. And so when Claire is 6 years old, she's in this meadow on her parents' property, and her parents are very rich. So even though this is on their property, they can't see where she is. And so she's in this meadow when she's 6 years old, when this man in his mid to late 30s shows up, and he tells her that he is a time traveler, this man being Henry, of course. And then from the time Claire is 6 up until she is 18, he visits her frequently throughout her adolescence. And when she is little, she has her like little girl crush on him, but over time, this develops into a love for him, partly because he is visiting from the future. And at one point when she is like old enough, he admits to her that in the future, he is married to adult Claire. And so this just furthers her belief in him being her soulmate, and they are destined to be together because they are together in the future, you know? And so throughout her youth, she is getting to know older Henry from the future, and it isn't until she is 20 that she then meets present day Henry, and he is younger than she has ever seen him. He is 28 years old, and he doesn't even know who she is, right? Because it's future him that goes to visit her. And so she reveals to him how she knows him and their whole connection. And then from here, they begin to date and soon marry. And now it's time to get into my book rant section of this video. And I did go into this book with an open mind, and I thought it was a really cool concept, and I was excited to read it. But before long, I just had one complaint after another. And as they start to pile up, I just was getting more and more annoyed as the book went on. But I did finish it, so I mean, I guess that means something. So for starters, we hear about the many times Henry visits young Claire, and this is narrated from Claire's perspective as well as Henry, so we jump back and forth. And when it's from Claire's perspective and she is like 6 to 13 years old, it's written in the voice of a child, whatever age she is supposed to be. And I rarely like books narrated by children, so that is personal preference, but this one was no exception. I hated these parts and just wanted her to hurry and get to her adult voice. And then also, once she is like 16 years old, Henry comes to visit her, and she tells him that she went on a date with a guy and he is physically abusive to her. And so she tells him that she wants Henry's help to get revenge on this guy. And so Henry does, he helps her. And this part of the story was written so poorly, and it was just so cringy. And it was supposed to be this like hell yeah moment for Claire. Like, yeah, get revenge on this guy who, you know, tends to just get away with this type of behavior. And we're also supposed to like Henry because he is there standing up for Claire and defending her. But it was just so cheesy and so cheap too. And I'm all for stories of female revenge. I love that when it's done well, but this was not done well. Like this part of the story, so much of this book actually is written as if it's like some kind of teenage fantasy targeted for other teens, when in reality it was written by a 40-year-old woman and it's targeted towards other adults. And so yeah, it just came off as like this teenager's fantasy. And again, it was just so cringy and stupid, and I hated it. And then the whole thing with Henry visiting Claire throughout these formative years, it was so uncomfortable for so many different reasons, because he is clearly grooming her, right? And he is making her see him as the perfect guy, and he is priming her for this future relationship and for her to be okay with his time traveling. And had they met for the first time when she was a grown adult, she could weigh the options of a relationship like this, you know? But she never gets the opportunity to weigh the options, because from 6 years old, she is primed to see him as the ideal guy and her soulmate, and she knows in the future they marry, so she never even questions it. And we frequently hear about how like he'll teach her different things about life and this and that throughout her youth, and yeah, it was just so uncomfortable. And then when they meet in present day, like I said, Henry is younger than Claire has ever seen him. And so he is not like the Henry she sees, 10, 15 years from now in the future who has visited her. And so he's kind of rough around the edges. And at one point, older Henry comes to visit this version of Claire, and she tells him like, oh, like I've missed you because the young you that I'm currently with, he isn't you yet. Like, when will you become this version of you that I love so much, that I've grown up with? And he tells her like, oh, just have patience and stick it out. And due to your influence, young Henry will become the better person that you know adult Henry to be, essentially. So it's that whole thing of, because Henry is kind of a jerk when he's young, but it's the whole thing of like why girls fall for jerks. And it's because they think like, oh, I can change him. Or they think like, oh, he'll change for me. I'll be the exception and he'll become a better person because of me. And that's such a stupid cliche and a stupid trope. And it's also kind of harmful, right? Because young people who read books like this think it's romantic to get with someone with the idea of changing them. And that is never a good idea. Like, no matter your gender, you should not get with someone if you don't love them the way they are right now. Like, don't get with someone that you want to change. Like, that's never a good idea. And I hate that trope. And again, people who don't know any better would read a book like this and think that that's romantic, because it works, right? Henry does change due to her influence. And so, yeah, I just really disliked that too. But then, one of the more frustrating parts of this story is that Claire has a best friend, quote unquote, named Charisse, and Charisse has a boyfriend who she later marries named Gomez. And again, because this is written like some teenage girl's wish fulfillment, Gomez harbors a crush on Claire throughout the entire story. They know each other for a long time, well over 10 years, and this whole time he is in love with her, despite the fact that he is dating Charisse. He later marries Charisse and has kids with her, and yet he's still in love with Claire. So that right there is already cheesy and annoying, and I don't like it. But then they make it even worse, because when Charisse and Gomez are dating seriously, their boyfriend-girlfriend, Charisse is out of town and Claire has sex with Gomez. And there are 2 years between when she last sees future Henry at 18. She doesn't meet present-day Henry until 20. And so it's in this 2-year gap where she doesn't see Henry at all. And when she was 18, the last time she saw Henry, he tells her like, go out and explore the world and date other people. And so it is during that time that she sleeps with Gomez. However, at some point during her and Henry's relationship, she does admit to him that she slept with Gomez during that in-between time. And she is racked with guilt over this because she feels like she was cheating on Henry. But Henry, he doesn't see it as a big deal, because he's like, oh, like that was before we even met in real time. Like that's fine. But honestly, like, she shouldn't feel guilty as far as Henry is concerned. She should feel guilty for betraying her best friend, because she had sex with her best friend's boyfriend. And Henry, he shouldn't be upset because she cheated on him, because she didn't. What he should be upset by is like, wow, like you're a bad friend because you call Charisse your best friend and yet you had sex with her boyfriend and you have no remorse as far as she is concerned. And as if that wasn't bad enough, later in the story, Henry ends up dying. And so then Claire is alone with Gomez. They are waiting for Charisse to return with the kids, and Gomez makes a pass at Claire because of course he is still in love with her. And then from there, the two of them end up having sex. But while she is with him, she's imagining being with Henry, and she's kind of like transported in a sense to a previous time when she and Henry had made love. And she even calls out Henry's name. And then Charisse ends up coming home, so Claire hurries and runs into the bathroom to go get changed. And while she's in the bathroom, she is like, what have I become? And I was like, thank you. Finally, she realizes that it's bad to sleep with another person's husband. But no, she goes from that to being like, now I have become the time traveler. Because while she was with Gomez, all she could think of was this past time with Henry. And I was just like, like, are you serious right now? Is this really being played as romantic in some like tragic way, or like she can't live in the present because she misses Henry so much? It was just so stupid. You just had sex with your best friend's husband and she doesn't feel bad about it at all. And it just really bothered me, as you can tell. Again, having every guy who knows Claire be in love with her is already really stupid. But then for her to betray her best friend, and twice she has sex with Charisse's boyfriend, later husband, and yet as far as Charisse is concerned, she doesn't feel bad at all. Like, that seems very narcissistic. Like, she's just the center of her universe and Charisse's feelings don't even matter. She doesn't even care. Charisse doesn't even come across like a real person. Also, Charisse, earlier, before Henry dies, she knows Gomez is in love with Claire and she and Henry are alone together, and she tells him that like she has a fear that Gomez will leave her to be with Claire. And that too, it's like, okay, if you know your husband has been in love with this woman for years, then either one, you need to leave him, or two, if you love him that much and you value the relationship and you think it can work out still, then you just need to stop being friends with Claire, right? You gotta pick one or the other, because clearly this is a weird situation you're in and it's not worth it. But yeah, anyway. But there's still more I want to complain about, because this book has so many pointless dream sequences. Like, we get a few early on, but then later in the book, we get whole chapters dedicated to these dreams, and the chapter names, like one is baby dreams and then one is feet dreams. And as soon as I saw one of these chapter titles, we already had gotten some stupid dreams and now a whole chapter dedicated to them. Like, no, like, why are you telling us about these dreams? They serve no purpose. And this book was just too long. And part of the reason is because we spent so much time hearing about dreams that just didn't matter. Like, why are you telling us this? Why did the editor not have these cut? It makes no sense. And speaking of the book being too long, we also get so many lists of things. Like, they go to a sushi restaurant and we hear about what they order. And then later she's going through a grocery bag and we hear about the whole list of groceries within the bag. And yes, there is something in this grocery bag that comes into play, but she could have just told us about this item that was found. We don't need to hear about everything else. And then also so much talk of punk music and so many punk bands listed off. And I get punk music is one of the ways Henry and Claire bond, but we didn't need to spend so much time hearing about this band and who's good, who's not. I don't know. I don't care. Something else I didn't care about was how much she wrote about Claire's paper art. I don't care about her silly art projects. Why are you telling me about this? Like, I get Claire's art is part of her personality, so yeah, tell us about it to some extent, but either one, tell us about it in an interesting way, or two, just don't tell us so much about it, because again, I don't care. Like, it honestly felt at times like she was trying to reach a certain word count, to be honest. There's even more I could complain about, but I think that's enough for now. So that is where I will end my book rant. And in case you can't tell, I wouldn't recommend this book. I didn't like it. I didn't find it romantic. It was too long. I didn't like the characters. It had so many annoying cliches and tropes. And it could have been a really thought-provoking book that delved into this double-sided manipulation we have going on between Henry and Claire. Like, I'll be getting into it later, but that really could have been such an interesting concept had the author written about it in a better way, but she just writes it as if it's romantic, and it's not. And as far as characters being unlikable, I do want to clarify that I like reading books with unlikable people. For example, I love Ottessa Moshfegh's books, and basically all of her books, the characters are very unlikable. But my problem with this book is that these people are written as if we should be rooting for them, and as if these things they do, like Claire cheating with Gomez, it's written as if that wasn't even a bad thing. And again, I don't need the author to blatantly tell me like Claire cheats with Gomez and this is bad. I don't need it to be like that. I just want there to be more nuance to it. The author, it just felt like she was writing about these things and it was like it didn't even occur to her that it was a bad thing, right? Like Charisse's feelings really didn't matter at all. And so it's not written as if it's a bad thing because Charisse is just some random side character, so who cares? And yeah, that's just kind of how it came across. And I just thought it was very poorly written. And again, it reads as if it's someone very young writing what they think is romantic, but the author was 40 years old. This was her first book though, so I'm curious if she got better with her later books. I don't know. But yeah, this reads like a teenage fantasy, a teenage wish fulfillment. But now that the majority of my complaints are out of the way, let's get into the plot. A big part of this story is them wanting to have a baby, specifically Claire wanting to have a baby. Because once they are married, she does eventually get pregnant. However, she miscarries, and she miscarries many times. And so they realize like this baby must have the time travel gene. And so when it is in her belly, it is time traveling, which causes it to die. And so Henry reaches out to this geneticist, and this man does different tests, and he does help figure things out with Henry's condition and why this happens. However, he doesn't provide any reasonable solutions as far as Claire maintaining a pregnancy. And Claire wants to keep trying for children. However, Henry is like, no, like this is too dangerous for you and we need to stop. And in the book, Henry decides that he is going to get a vasectomy without telling Claire. And so he goes to the clinic. However, once he is there, like the stress of the situation causes him to time travel, and he shows up in the meadow. And so he does not get the vasectomy, but he is there with 15-year-old Claire, and he tells her, I was just about to do something that was going to make adult Claire very angry, and like we're arguing right now, and it's such a stressful time in the future. And 15-year-old Claire is wanting more details, but he doesn't tell her. And then he ends up forcefully kissing her despite her resisting. And then after he pulls away, she tells him, you've never kissed me before. So as far as she is concerned, this was their first kiss. And I get that she eventually becomes his wife, but I don't care. A man in his late 30s, pushing 40, forcing himself on a 15-year-old, like that's gross. But then he transports back to current day Claire, and he tells her what day he was just at. Like, oh, I just kissed you for the first time when you were 15 years old. And she remembers the conversation from that time, and she's like, oh, I bet I can guess what you just tried to do. I bet you tried to get a vasectomy. And he's like, oh, like, yeah, that is. And she tells him, like, go ahead and schedule it. Go ahead and get it done. I'm tired of fighting about this. But also in the book, a future Henry comes to visit Claire at this time, and he tells her that in the future they do have a child. So knowing that they for sure have a successful pregnancy gives her this new confidence and peace, and she knows it will happen. And so that's another reason why she's like, go ahead and get the vasectomy. I know I'll get pregnant somehow. Whereas in the movie, he actually does go through with it and he gets the vasectomy. And then from there, he time travels to the past with Claire. And in the movie, it's the same where he tells her, like, I just did something that's going to make adult Claire angry. And then he forcefully kisses her. In the movie, at this point, Claire is played by Rachel McAdams. And so it doesn't come across quite as bothersome because she's being played by an adult woman. But also in the movie, they clarified that she is 18 at this point, not 15. But when he comes back to present day, again, he tells her like, oh, I was just in the meadow and I just kissed you for the first time. And again, she remembers the conversation and she's like, what did you do? And then he tells her that he got a vasectomy and she feels so betrayed. And then from here, she tells him, you tricked me. You came to that meadow and you forced yourself into the heart and mind of a little girl. What, you think I wanted this life? This husband that disappears without any warning? And then he says, you had a choice. And then she says, I never had a choice. And this scene was fantastic. And this is what I was waiting for in the book. I kept waiting for Claire to mature and over time realize what a messed up situation she is in with Henry. Again, like he groomed her as a child and she never had any true agency in her life because for one, like, yeah, he proposes, but she knew they were going to get married. So it's like she never really had a choice there. And then even when they're buying a house, Henry has seen their future house from the backyard. So every house they go in, he just looks at the back and he's like, nope, this isn't it. And it doesn't matter what Claire thinks. He's like, I know what house we're getting, so it doesn't even matter. And so even though he restrains himself from giving details about the future, he still gives enough details that, again, she just never really does have a choice. And again, I know Henry can't control when or where he goes. So as far as him visiting her so much throughout her adolescence, it's not like he could control it necessarily. And it's interesting too, because when Claire meets Henry in present day, 20-year-old Claire gives him, in the book, she gives him a list of the dates and times that he shows up in the meadow. And then he eventually gives this list to young Claire. That way she knows when to show up in the meadow. And so it's this weird circle where it's like, where did this start? And she also does force herself upon him when they meet in real time. And again, she has the whole thing where she wants to mold him and turn him into her dream guy who she knows from the meadow. But still, Claire is 20 at this point. Henry is 28. That is very different than when Claire was a child and Henry was decades older. Like Claire as a child was so much more malleable, right? And she was so much more impressionable and so much easier to manipulate. And again, the way he primed her for this stressful relationship. And then also in the book, we hear that Henry took Claire's virginity when she was 18, and he makes a point to wait till she is 18, despite her pleading. You know, once she's around 16 or so, she is like begging him to have sex with her, but he refuses because she's not 18 yet. And we're supposed to see that as him being admirable, like, oh, what a decent guy. He waited till it was legal. When really, it's still gross that he, as a 40-year-old, manipulated this teen and had sex with her when she was 18. And if anything, having sex with her at 18, the last time he sees her, it just solidifies him as her dream guy, right? So if he really cared about Claire, he should not have had sex with her at all until they met in real time. And it is fascinating, though, when you think about this relationship and this circle, this cycle they're in, like who is controlling who is manipulating who. And again, I just wish the author wrote about this in more of a sophisticated adult way that really delved into this weird situation they're in. Because if you think about it, Henry and Claire are kind of in a toxic relationship in some ways, and yet it's written about as if it's so romantic. Albeit tragic, but still it's written about in a very romantic way. But to move on with the plot. So eventually they do have a child, and her name is Alba. And in the movie, so Henry, he did get a vasectomy. But then one night when they are asleep, they get a call from a Henry from the past who has shown up in this present day, and he wants to be picked up because it's crazy cold outside. And so Claire leaves current Henry sleeping, and she goes out to pick up past Henry. And while she is in the car with him, she instigates sex. And so she has sex with past Henry before his vasectomy. And this is how she gets pregnant. Whereas in the book, she gets pregnant because a past Henry shows up and he sees the two of them sleeping in bed. And suddenly he's overcome with a lust for Claire, and he just has to have her. And so he climbs into bed and begins having sex with her. And during it, she kind of like half wakes up. And this was just so weird. Like the other Henry is right there sleeping beside them. Claire is like not even awake. It was just such a weird situation. And the movie was so much better because, you know, it's not weird. But also I like that in the movie, Claire was in control of the situation, right? Like she decided that this is what was going to happen. And yeah, it was just so much better in the movie. But before Alba is even born, Henry time travels to the future when Alba is 10 years old, and she is thrilled to see him. And he finds out that when she was 5, he had died. And we also find out that Alba herself is a time traveler. However, she has learned how to control it, at least to some extent. And at one point, young Alba is visited by an older Alba. And this was such a cool scene in both book and movie when Claire is like, who is Alba talking to outside? And Henry comes over and he's like, that's Alba. Like they're both Alba. So it was just such a cool situation. But due to this visit by older Alba, Claire eventually realizes that Henry will soon die. The book ending, so Henry, he gets hypothermia from a time travel visit to where it was wintertime. He shows up in present day and he has hypothermia. And he also gets frostbite and has to have his feet amputated. And so then later, when he doesn't have any feet, he then time travels to Claire's youth, and her father was into hunting. And because he can't run, because he has no feet, he ends up getting shot accidentally by this dad, and he ends up dying. And through the following years after his death, Alba will still see him because, you know, the past him would travel to the future. And so future Alba still gets to see him despite his death. And then since she time travels, we also get moments where they both have time traveled back to the 70s and they spend time together in that way. And so in the book, even after his death, Alba does see him quite frequently. However, Claire never sees him. However, he does leave her a letter. And in this letter, he writes that he doesn't want her waiting around for him, and he wants her to go out and live her life. But he does end the letter saying, by the way, though, one time I time traveled well into the future and I saw you as an old woman. So once you get really old, you'll have that to look forward to, basically. And then we flash forward to Claire in her 80s, and we read how she spends every day the same, and how part of her day involves waiting around for Henry to show up, as if that's so romantic. And it's just like, man, Henry's been dead for like 50 years at this point, Claire. You need to move on, right? Like, this isn't romantic, that she just spends her days like just tragically waiting for Henry to come back. That was so dumb. But the movie ending is a little different. He does get get hypothermia. However, in the movie, he does not get his feet amputated. Instead, he is just in a wheelchair. But it's still the same thing where because he can't move, he ends up getting shot when he goes into the past and then he dies. However, in the movie, we then cut to the future where Alba is playing in the meadow in Claire's parents' yard, and then Henry shows up. And so they call out to Claire to hurry and come. And so Claire ends up running to the meadow, and she and Henry run to be with each other, and they're able to hug and kiss. And she tells him, like, why didn't you tell me you were going to show up? I would have been waiting. And he tells her, I don't want you waiting. I want you to get out and live your life. And then from here, he disappears, and then Claire and Alba walk off together. And so there is a lot from the book that was not in the movie, but to be honest, there was very few things that I missed not seeing in the movie. There was one part when Henry is talking to his dad, and his dad knows he's a time traveler. And he and his dad have a very strained relationship ever since the death of his mom when Henry was 6. And at one point, he goes there to get his mom's wedding ring so that he can propose to Claire. And he tells the dad that there are good things about his time traveling. For example, he can time travel into the past, and he's gotten to see his mom so many times. And he says even, I've seen you and my mom together when I was a baby, back when you were happy before she died. And he says something along the lines of, when I see you as that man, it makes me wish I could have been raised by a dad like that, because his dad changed so much after the wife's death. And wow, like what a gut punch. But I thought that was a great line. And in both book and movie, he does repair the relationship with his father after he gets with Claire. And we also, again, see so many visits with Henry visiting young Claire, and they even will like go out and do stuff, like when they got revenge on that guy who abused Claire, right? And so in the movie, they just see each other in the meadow. But yeah, in the book, we hear about so many times he visits her, and they will even leave the meadow. And then there are also multiple characters that are not in the movie at all. For example, this mother figure Henry has, who is named Mrs. Kim, as well as various friends of his, including a guy that will supply him with drugs because Henry tries different drugs and medications in order to control the time traveling. And then there's also Henry's girlfriend from before he meets Claire, and her name is Ingrid. And he and Ingrid had a very unhealthy relationship, and Ingrid ends up committing suicide. And right before Henry dies, he time travels to the very night that she killed herself. But yeah, she is not in the movie at all. We also hear a lot more about Claire and her family and the family drama they have going on, and her mom suffers from mental health issues, but none of these details were in the movie. We also see more of his work life at the library in the book, whereas in the movie we don't see that at all. And then Gomez and Charisse are in the movie, but thankfully there is no cheating, and Gomez does not have a crush on Claire. Also, the movie has a scene where soon after they're married, Henry disappears, and he is gone for 2 weeks, and we just see Claire going about her life. And then when he shows up again, she is on her way to work, and he's like, "You're leaving? I just got here." And she's like, "I can't sit around waiting for you. Like, I need to live my life, and just because you're showing up now doesn't mean I can drop everything. Like, I still need to go about my own day. My life can't be dictated by your time traveling." And I thought that was a great scene in the movie, but it wasn't in the book. But when it comes to book versus movie, I will not drag this out because it's pretty obvious that I preferred the movie over the book. It was so much better. Rachel McAdams, she's just perfection. I just love her so much. But also, there were so many things about the book I disliked, as I've already gotten into. There were some things I liked about the book. For example, when Alba does see Henry and they spend time together as they both time travel, I thought that was sweet, as well as Henry seeing his parents in the past. Those moments were very tender and touching. And I also did think it was fun how with their wedding, Henry time travels. And so the young Henry disappears, but then older Henry shows up, and so the wedding ceremony is with older Henry, but then eventually he disappears and young Henry comes back. But even in the movie, this was better because when young Henry returns, he says something like, "You wish I was him, don't you?" Because again, Claire, especially in the book, she's like, "Oh, young Henry isn't as good as the old Henry that I know." But in the movie, after he says this, she says, "But you are him." And I just love that moment because she loves him and accepts him as he is. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on the book and movie, The Time Traveler's Wife. There is a TV show adaptation from 2022, and initially I read that it was faithful to the book, and I just had zero interest spending, like 8 hours of my life watching this show. But then I was reading about it on Reddit, and someone on Reddit says that yes, the show is faithful to the book. However, the show actually delves into this weird dynamic they have with this double manipulation and this grooming, and they actually address that side of it. So it's faithful to the book while also getting into those complexities, right? And not just playing it as romance. So for those who have seen the TV show, if that is true, let me know, because as of right now, if it's just faithful to the book on the surface, I have no interest in the show. But if they delve a bit more into the weird situation he and Claire are in, then I would definitely be interested in watching it. If you've seen the show, comment down below and let me know if I should watch it or not. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you again to Sapphire Witch for requesting this. Even if I didn't like the book, this still gave me a lot to talk about. And so I did enjoy the process of making this video, and I did really enjoy the movie too. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.